to this episode of Sunny Silver Linings. Sunny's guest today is Marcus Bond from The Collaborative Way. Marcus has over 30 years of experience in the areas of culture change, leadership development, and business coaching. Marcus's clients consistently report significant results in creating sustainable cultures of excellence, increased profits, and extraordinary workplaces. And now, your host, the founder and CEO of IT by Design, Mr. Sunny Kela. Over to you, Sunny.
Marcus, thank you so much for joining me today. I truly appreciate your partnership and your time today, buddy.
Yeah, thank you, Sunny. You're very welcome, and thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, and we have been, we were introduced to the Collaborative Way, your company and your team, last year in Q4. And we started working with you in the beginning of this year and made so much progress in terms of our culture. And we always talk about, culture and the importance of culture for businesses, and culture impacts every part of your business. And we are big on culture, always learning and getting better and better to make sure that we have the right culture to make the right impact on our people, which is our purpose, building communities with passion for excellence, passion for people, and community of ITBD team members, community of our strategic partners like the Collaborative Way, and the community of our client partners. Those three pillars are our purpose, and making the right impact on these three communities and bringing these three communities together to create value for each other. And that is our why of our existence, ITBD's why, and why we do what we do. And so culture is a big part of community building. What culture you bring to that community, right? And being intentional about co-creating that plan and being intentional about what we want to live as core values and our way of life. And we always are very passionate about culture topics. And I'm super excited about having that culture conversation with you, Marcus, because you have a very unique way to help businesses with culture initiatives. And that's why I'm super excited about our conversation. So let's start, Marcus, with tell us a little bit about yourself and your unique approach to help businesses with culture initiatives.
Okay, good. Thank you. I agree with everything you just said there. And that's been my experience, is that culture affects every part of the business, because it's a lot of the how everything gets done, And excuse me, what's unique about the Collaborative Way approach is there's a couple of things. One is, we mostly find that if you don't, and very often companies don't intentionally create a culture, then they just get the culture that they get from all the different habits and experiences of everybody who works together. What we've seen, and especially in like an MSP type environment, where it's usually an owner-driven thing at the beginning, and the culture will usually be similar to what the owner's personality is and their leadership style, which is all fine until you get to about 5-10 people. It starts to become too much. And as you add people and grow, you just keep bringing in more components, but it's usually not so intentionally aligned and put together. And then human behavior kicks in, human tendencies, where we all think everybody should work the way we work. And when people work differently, and then how do you sort that all out? And then you start to have some lack of trust, resentments, and so on. So you're working on top of all that. Mm-hmm. So with the Collaborative Way, one thing is you're saying, hey, we're going to intentionally design a culture here, and I'm going to say what it is. And then the second thing is, people think of culture, and a lot of times they think of communication. And it's true that communication is probably the number one element of that defines a culture. So, right, does that make sense what I'm saying there so far?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, great. So then and of course, communication is the medium that we get most of our work done, right? Pretty much anything you as a leader want to accomplish, you have to communicate it to someone through speaking or email, which is also, it's just speaking and writing. And then the other part is the receiving, the listening part, or the reading, which is the same as listening to an email, text, and so on, all the other different mediums. So communication is very important. But we've gone further than that and developed over these last 30 years a model of designing a culture where almost everything that you do in an organization is covered with the thread of communication going through it. So just as an overview, and the main things are, we always focus on in the culture, ultimately the culture has to support what you're up to, right? What you're trying to accomplish in terms of your business results and how you want your company to feel, how it's going to, customers are going to feel like when they work with your company. What's that like? What's it feel like to work with them? What's it feel like to work there inside the company?
Yeah.
And how do you communicate, and how do you handle your miscommunications, and how do you handle your breakdowns? So that all is part of this simple and elegant process we call the collaborative way, which involves 5 core practices, which is listening generously, speaking straight, being for each other, honoring each other's commitments. How do you, it's a whole big area of honoring commitments. What do you do when people don't honor the commitments? And how do you improve your ability to honor commitments and make the goals and commitments that you have with each other? And then acknowledgement and appreciation keeps it all together. So those are the 5 core practices. We also bring in looking at alignment and inclusion. These are other core important things for the culture, and also, of course, ethic of responsibility and a context of learning. So all put together, that's the whole collaborative way. And I think today we're going to dive right into listening generously. And as we talk about this, you see this approach is very specific. People have values to drive the company culture, but everybody interprets those values differently. And what we're looking at is, what are the behaviors? So there's very specific behaviors in listening generously. There's very specific behaviors in speaking straight, and in honoring commitments. Yeah. So it kind of gives you something you can really get your arms around. People can understand it. Everyone can see, oh, wow, this is a great way of working. Yes, we should work together this way. So instead of having the hundreds of different perspectives of how you work together, you say, hey, here's a good way of working together. Is it okay with everybody? People say, yes, this makes a lot of sense. We should all work this way. It would really be great for all of us and for the success of the company. So that's what we mean by a called out intentional creation. Here's the tools. Now let's practice it. And we get better and better. And then you start having that culture.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Marcus. What I heard you saying, first of all, the way you defined culture, that how people feel, because that's important for us to understand, right? What is culture? How do we define culture? And that's the definition that we use here at IT by Design as well, that culture is a feeling. And make how people feel when they work with each other, when they work in the environment that you create. And another thing that I heard you saying is that culture going to get created one way or the other. If you are intentional about creating the culture that makes people feel good about working in that environment, then you're intentional about the feeling that you want people to have when they're working with you. working in the company. And if you are not intentional about this, that is going to be there, but it's going to be created by people as the company grows beyond those 7, 10 people, because then a lot of that human element that you talked about is going to kick in. And so it is important for companies to make sure that you have a culture plan and it's co-created and is created with the values, the core values that you want to live. And another thing that I heard you saying, Marcus, is that everything starts with listening and communication. It could be email, it could be verbal, it could be non-verbal, is a big piece of creating the right culture. And so we want. I know we want to take a deeper dive into listening. And so, can you talk to me in terms of what is the first thing for people to know about listening?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I think, that's the thing. We talk about communication. We all know how crucial communication is. And a lot of times when we think about communication, we tend to think mostly about speaking. We've been conditioned in our cultures to think speaking is where the power is. And obviously speaking is important. But what we found as we explored all this is that really at least as much, if not more, of the power is in the listening. And by and large, we've not been trained very much about how to really listen. Most of us just listen the way we listen. So, yeah. So the very first thing to know about listening, and I like doing this because everybody who's listening right now, you can start to tune into, well, how are you listening? First thing you're going to notice probably is that you've noticed in the first, I don't know, we've been on for 5 minutes, you've probably checked out. In other words, your mind had got distracted and started thinking about something else and doing something else maybe. And that's what we call this distracted listening, this kind of not a very, very powerful openness thing. So the very first skill for an effective listener and the beginning of listening generally is what we call paying attention. So even right now, you're going to notice how even in the few seconds I've been talking about paying attention, your attention goes in and out. So, and that's all okay. And that's the same. We all have that. When I started my journey of listening practice about 30 years ago, I had to learn to train my mind on how to focus. Like how do I focus enough to stay checked in to kind of hear what people are saying, and it's not easy. I think I started at the very best, I was checked out more than 50% of the time. And as I've worked on it and worked on it and worked on it, I'm better and better at staying checked in. And the skill, and I might talk about this a little bit more later, but the skill is really about noticing when you're checked out. Like if you really want to hear what people are saying, at the very least, the first step is check back in. Excuse me, I just checked out. I was distracted. And could you say that again? Of course, where we want to get here is that the purpose of communication is to get something that's inside of you, energy, feeling, idea, creativity, innovation, something, inspiration, emotions and feelings and reproduce it over there in another human being or beings. And that's not an easy thing to do. That's a big ask right there. And so just getting it all out clear is one thing, but then how is it getting heard and received over there? Are you getting across what you want to get across? And this is such a potent topic, and people love this topic because mostly people feel like that's not happening. And we can all look from our own experience that we mostly don't feel like people get us. And how do I get it across? How do I get them to understand and see it the way I see it? And not even that they have to see it the way I see it, but just to understand how I see it. And how do I listen in such a way to get and understand what they're trying to say, And you can feel how that pulls you into so communication turns out to be a collaboration. True communication, effective communication is a collaboration of the people involved in the communication. So, as you're listening, pay attention to your drifting. You're checking in and out. And if you're multitasking, you're going to notice that's going to take a big chunk of your listening out of the picture. And you may be able to hear the words, but it's going to make it harder to get the deeper meaning and feelings and emotions and energy and intent of the communication will be missed. And that'll be frustrating for them, and it'll be frustrating for you. And that's mostly how communication is for us, most of us, kind of frustrating. And then you throw on top of the fact that everybody feels like they don't have enough time to take the time to, and we can talk more about that too, is that it's really, it turns out that a lot of the not having enough time conversation is because we don't listen very well up front.
Yeah.
So I think to answer your question is paying attention. It's the first thing you know about listening is that it's a hard thing to do. We're not trained. We don't know how to do it. We got a lot of things going on in the way. And so to intentionally focus on your listening is one thing. And the value and the benefits of that is beyond what most people can imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Marcus. So what I heard you saying so far is that there are 5 practices. And the first practice that you start with is listening, because that's where everything starts in terms of communicating effectively. And where do you start with listening? Listening practice is paying attention, being aware that you're paying attention. And if you kind of you see that you're not paying attention, that keep reminding yourself, and it's a practice, is you have to build that muscle for paying attention, and the impact that you're making on the other person, or the way that message is landing. What you're saying is that what that other person is hearing, and at the end of the day, again, you are trying to make the right impact, and at the end of the day, is that feeling, right? How that person is feeling from what you're saying in terms of team environment. And so listening is where it starts. Now, there's a lot going on, right? So just to share an example, Marcus, after your training and being intentional, and now being aware and practicing that, building that muscle of listening, with that paying attention during my interviews with my candidates. I used to, when I interview people for the positions that I need to be part of the interview panel, I'm listening to the candidate, and at the same time, I'm thinking, okay, this person is saying this, and now my next question for this candidate is going to be this. Now, what changed after your training was, so I still have to think my next question with the candidate, but I'm present when that person is answering that first question. I'm building that muscle of listening while that person is answering my question. And then even if I have to take a pause to ask my next question, and that's where I'm working right now in terms of applying that knowledge from your training into my day-to-day life, and making really this collaborative way practices as way of my life. And that journey that started in the beginning is really helping and making that impact. Now, but one thing that I experience and still struggle is that there is a lot going on. Even now when we're talking, I'm trying to remember what you're saying. I'm trying to take a note of a few things to make sure that I get it and we can have this collaboration and this conversation. So there's a lot going on when you're listening. How do you keep your mind quiet when you're listening so that you're really moving from wherever you are, 10%, 20% to the next level?
Okay, great question, Sunny. And just to highlight, because you're demonstrating a lot of good listening principles right now. If people are noticing that, you're what I would call what we call replicating what I've said. You know, you're checking in. So here's what I've heard you say is this and this, which is great. Because if it was different than what I was saying, I could then jump in and correct it and say, no, I really was meaning this more than that.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is to make this collaborative that, you know, it's okay for you to pause. You know, if I see you pausing after I speak before you respond, everything is counterintuitive in a way. We think that you're supposed to respond really super fast and be the smartest guy in the room. But it's like, if I see you pausing and like, you know, one of the best listeners that I've met in my life early on in my career, when I worked at Verizon, was a gentleman. And every time I talked to him, is even before I knew very much about this, he paused. He took a few seconds after I was done speaking. And at first it's a little awkward. You're like, and then I asked him about it, but his response, he said, well, I take time. I want to hear everything you say, and then I prepare my response. Most people hear a few words, think they know what you're going to say, and then just waiting for you to, excuse me, to shut up so they can tell you what they think about what you just said. That's normal communication. But what he would do was hear it, and then when we communicate that way, our responses are off the mark, and the other person is like, whoa, that's not related to what I just said. Let me try again. That's frustrating. And then you say it again. They come back with another different response, and we get frustrated and decide, I can't really talk to this person. See, and that's how culture gets developed. I'm kind of talking about a couple things at once, if we will, but I'll come back to it. But culture is, you know, all day long, you're having conversations and writing and reading emails. And how you feel about those conversations and those interactions is going to be how you feel about working there. And that's what the culture feels like. And it's a collection of every employee's, the hundreds of conversations that all employees have together, including with outside folks as well. So if you start having different conversations, interactions by changing the listening, you start to have immediately a different culture. And it'll take time, of course, to reverberate through the whole company and change how the whole company feels. But with you, your team, the people around you, it's like that. So I think what you're talking about, well, what about all this stuff going on in our heads? The first thing to be aware of it. I got a lot of stuff going on, which makes it hard for me to hear what you're actually saying. But you don't have to hide that. You know, and so for paying attention, you get better at noticing when you're checked out and you bring yourself checked in. Now, the other thing, so when you're checked out, you just checked out. When you're checked in,
yeah,
there's still a whole bunch of people also say, what's the difference? I took a course on active listening. And I was, you know, I know you need to focus and tune in and body language and all this, right? Good stuff. Except now you're checked in and you're actively listening and you still have all your filters in place. So we have to talk about filters. Filters, in a way, are the stuff that's going on in your head. So when you're speaking, or when I'm speaking, as you were saying, and you're trying to hear what I'm saying, right? You're holding a place mark in the conversation. You want to hear what I'm saying, you're thinking, but you're also aware that you're going to respond in some way. So all this stuff is going on. And the filters could be, well, I like there's an agree, disagree filter. So there's all these universal filters. So first of all, as I talk about this, it's going to make things seem actually even worse and worse. But we'll come back to how do you quiet it all down a little bit. So the filters, everybody has general filters called like agree, disagree, right, wrong, evaluative, and judging filters. I like what they're saying. I don't like what they're saying. Then we have more personal filters. Like we have filters for everybody in our life. Like, oh, well, Sonny, well, excuse me, this is not a real filter, but Sonny, he's a jerk. You know, or he doesn't listen. Or Ken, he's a rambler. So as soon as these people come into your office or in your space, or you see the email, immediately that filter comes in without any effort on your part. And now everything you read or hear from this person is going through that filter. And only what can go through the filter will register. Mm. And unfortunately, most filters' purpose is to confirm what you already think. And as we go into this in the programs and the work and the training to become a more potent listener and clearing out all this stuff, You become all the filters are from the past. So you're going to come in with all your filters of life from your growing up and your experiences and jobs and different teams and bosses. And now those filters are in place. And now you create new filters for the people you're working with. So we got a whole filter situation going also, which makes it even hard when you are checked in to actually hear what's being said. So what do? First thing, to become aware. And then we all have personal filters. So I had a filter my whole life called I already know. And that filter limits what I hear and what I can learn because I already know. A, I already know what you're going to say. B, I already know what I'm going to say. But it doesn't, since I already know what you're going to say, I'm pretty much not listening very openly and very potently. You'll know you're a generous listener when you're being surprised. When people start surprising you, you can know that you've put your filters aside, which is what you really want to learn to do. And you probably have been practicing this. You have filters for your wonderful wife, Cam, co-worker / wife, and you have filters for everybody on your team. And that's okay. We all have filters. We need filters because we can't handle all the information stimulation that's coming, So, but what we're interested in and what we learn in the listening generously in the collaborative way is like, let's first of all check in. And this is something I didn't put in the notes. But for example, the very first, once you start paying attention and you're aware of your filters, instead of listening for like, oh, when's he going to shut up? Or what's the point? Or why is he saying this to me? Or why is she blaming me for this one? Or why is she being such a victim? All the things that are going on in your head. You can start to listen for, you can be aware of that and not pay attention. Kind of, we say, put it aside a little bit and listen for the contribution and value of what people are saying. Okay. And just that simple little thing to get out of that default judgmental kind of listening that most of us have is into, wow, most people when they speak, they got something they want to contribute. And there's certainly some value in what they're saying because there's something to learn about them. There's something you can learn for yourself. There's things about moving projects and work down the road all the time. And I want to throw in, Sonny, that, we don't expect people to listen like this all the time. If you're just having a social conversation, it's not a consequence. Yeah. But when there's significant conversations that have consequences, and almost all conversations do, because what you were pointing to before is we really want every conversation, important conversation, to feel like you're coming closer with your teammates, you're more understanding of each other, more appreciation of each other, and that you're moving things forward together. And you feel like I can always go to this person, have a good conversation, sort things out, and move things forward. Wow, what a great culture to work with.
Yeah.
So that was a lot, but go ahead, follow-up question.
Yeah, no, so no, I love this because everything starts with listening, and but there's normally a lot going on. Even now we are having this conversation, and so, but one really, really important point that you made is that there are those general filters, that agree, disagree filter, to judging, and some personal filters like, oh, I already know this stuff, right? Or I already know what you're going to say and what my response is going to be. So those are, I experience this almost every day. But when you're a student and you're aware, as you said, then you are able to really recognize it whenever you kind of see yourself doing it, and you then at least are aware and see, okay, how can I do better in terms of listening without filters, and these common filters, especially that are out there. And do you have any suggestion for someone who is a new student of generous listening? And I'm going to also ask that follow-up question as well. What do you mean by generous listening? But do you have any advice for a new student of collaborative way? What can they do to help with their filters or having less filters and paying more attention, less distractive listening and more active listening.
Yeah, it's an intention, an intentionality, a commitment to listen more generously, to listen generously. And the reason we call it listen generously is because it's really a generous thing to do. It's a generous act to put everything aside, pay attention to your filters, and keep your mind and listening as open and generous as possible, trying to hear and understand. That's a lot of work right there.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, it's a little challenging. And mostly what beginners report is like, oh, I filter, like, oh, I already know, or what's the point? And I can fix that. Like, that's another big filter, I can fix that. But even though they may not be sharing or talking to you about something that they want fixed, so it's really about connecting to the other person, finding out what is the intention of their communication. And I want to try and hear and receive the intention of that communication. And I want them to walk away feeling heard. So you can change your filters from, like, for me, I already know, now I listen, I don't know. That's what I do. I just replace this not empowering forwarding filter with a filter that empowers me. A filter that I have for somebody, they're always complaining about stuff. And I've changed it to, instead of listening for the complaining, I listen for their commitment underneath the complaint, you see? So I'm constantly working hard to hear your contribution, hear your positive intent, have you feel heard, have myself feel heard, and that we're having a satisfying conversation and I'm willing to take. So those are the time it takes to do that up front. So we have clear communication up front, and we don't have to deal with the upset of the continual misunderstandings that happen going down the road, which is detrimental to the culture you want to build.
Yeah. And Marcus, one thing that you shared during the training was, we all have our own personalities. And in terms of, so you can use DISC or other personality evaluation tools when we use. Some people are naturally good in listening than others, right? Because that's how they're built. Their factory installed listening rating is different. And when so for example, when you look at sales team members versus service team members, when you look at, so it makes them successful because that's who they are from their personality point of view. And where I'm going with this is that one thing that was a really good kind of learning for my team is when they're working cross-functionally is to recognize the personality of the other person. Because when you talked about, that willingness to be influenced during the conversation, some personalities are not that willing to be influenced by someone else. They're not curious to learn other ideas and other perspectives, or they're less interested in other perspectives. And it's more like, my way or the highway. But when you talk about creating a collaborative way culture, it's all about collaboration. And collaboration cannot happen if you are not willing to listen to other perspectives, if you're not willing to be influenced. And can you talk to me a little bit, because that was a really kind of more of awareness this week. We pick a core value of the week, Marcus, and this week core value is humility. And we always talk about what is humility and how is that connected with the collaborative way, which practice is kind of mapping with. And when teams started doing a little bit more research, how do you develop humility? And the first thing that always comes up is humility starts with listening and willingness to be influenced, right? And so then now we started kind of mapping this stuff, and I'm like, how can we get better in terms of our core values and collaborative way? And collaborative way starts with listening. And can you talk to us a little bit about how team members can still practice this when the other team members' personality is such that their readiness for this is a different level?
Okay, so now I'm gonna replicate and check that I'm understanding. So you're talking about how do you take into consideration the different personality traits of different individuals when it comes to listening generously?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yeah.
So, you know, it's important to remember because you keep saying, as somebody as an introduction, you know, everybody starts where they are. There's not some standard. This is the listening level you should get to. So you're going to be and listening wherever you are based on your personality and everything you've done up until now. And you can always improve. So the first thing is to make a commitment to listen generously, which includes the three things you just said. I want to, you know, listening for value and contribution.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing here is very super important, listening with curiosity, like authentic curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us have just become lost our curiosity, you know, because either we think we know or we're afraid to know because we don't have time to be curious. You know, I come back to that time thing because that's like one of the most common filters that people have, particularly in businesses. I'm too busy. I'm busy. I'm too busy. So that message is I'm too busy to listen to you, and it means you're not important to me, and so on. So listening with curiosity and you know, an intention to learn. And then the third thing you're saying, willingness to be influenced. So I just start with where everybody is, and willingness to be influenced means you're just willing to be. You may be influenced or not, but at least you're hearing. And if you hear something that influences you, you'll let yourself be influenced. And yes, that is humility.
Yeah,
that's humility. You know, like I don't know, and you're as equally what you're saying, and your perspectives are as equally valid as mine. See, this is what we want to give to each other, and the listening generously and collaborate levels the playing field. Nobody's better than anybody else. It's not about position or authority around the collaborative way. So everybody's going to start where they are, and then I'm going to be talking with you, and it's this collaborative interaction. So are you, do you understand what I'm saying? Tell me more. Oh, that's interesting. You don't want to accept the request I just made. Instead of me getting mad at you and telling you you're stupid, whatever, and you're always resistant, you're not committed, be like, oh, that's interesting. How come? Why not? Help me understand why you can't do that, and or why you're going to do something else. And so you start to just have these conversations. It will take a little more time up front, and it will save you hours and days and weeks and months, and produce the ability to be connected and know that you can work through stuff, and you'll go so fast once you start getting those other obstacles out of the way.
Yeah, and now let's talk about time, right? We always, I mean, personally, where I struggle as well is as an entrepreneur and a kind of a hyper growth more company where there's just always so much going on, and as an entrepreneur, you have to solve a lot of problems, right? And you have to you have that time limitation, and the balance that you need is that you want to listen to everyone around you, spend the time that is required with active listening, and on the other side then you have a business to run and there's a lot going on. So how do you create that balance? What is your advice for entrepreneurs where they have similar struggles where time is a limitation?
Yeah, you know, I always, I mean, of course, there's a lot of factors involved, how you schedule and commitments you make and delegation and so on. But in terms of the communication, I've just experienced myself and watched so many others that the more you're able to listen clearly up front and have a complete communication that's satisfying with the people around you, those few minutes or even half an hour of extra time to have the clarity and ensure the mutual understanding and alignment will create a bond and strength of relationship that it just saves you so much time going forward. So it's a little counterintuitive, but we're mostly as tricked to think that I just have to go fast. And I'm sorry, I'm going fast, so therefore I can't listen, and therefore I'm going to accept mistakes. I'm going to tolerate people not getting me, and I'm going to tolerate that I don't get you, and we're going to do the best we can on top of that muck. So it's a conscious choice. And if you start practicing, and I promise you that you will have more satisfying and quality conversations, and you'll see how it saves you time. You can have a really good 10-minute conversation or a really frustrating 30-minute conversation, and the takeaways will be very different. So just look at how much time you spend. I'm saying this not to you, to everybody out there. How much time is spent on cleaning up misunderstandings, poor communications, and then also it's harder to clean up the damage it does to the trust in the poor communication and misunderstandings, because people, they don't like sit around going, oh, well, that was just a misunderstanding. Sometimes they do, but they also go, he just doesn't listen. I don't think I can work with him so much anymore. And, it's always mostly their fault. That's where you get into the rest of the practice, is getting the blame and all that out of the space. But yeah, so time is a boogeyman. It's an illusion. It's not the problem.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying, Marcus, is time is required for collaboration. Either you kind of invest that time upfront, or at the end, either invest your time in listening, active listening, or invest that same time in cleanups. Pay now or pay later. You got to pay, right? Time is money, and you got to pay. Either pay now or pay later to do more cleanups. Did I hear you right?
Yes, you're absolutely, and it really is, and it's going to cost you more later. So my example is a business owner I've been working with. He will not take the time often to clarify his instructions to others and what he's asked them to do, and find out what they hear. Because we have to clarify here, why is listening so important? Well, because we don't really understand the impact of listening. Because, again, as I said at the very beginning, the communication is not what is said. The ultimate result of communication is what gets heard, right? Because people act, are they going to act? I like to ask this question, they're going to act on what you say or what they hear?
Yeah.
What is the answer to that?
Is that a question for me?
That's a question for you.
Okay. So thank you. I think I was probably not. I was just distracted there, Marcus.
It's okay. I'm just saying, are people going to act on what you say, or are they going to act on what they hear?
What they hear and how they feel that hearing.
And you know that now, but most people think it's good enough to just tell them, and then it's a crapshoot. Maybe they do it. Maybe they hear you correctly and do what you want, or they hear you incorrectly and do something else. Now you've got, so he had that happening a lot.
Yeah.
And then he's all upset at them. But I told you, but they say, oh, but I thought you said this. How many times a day does that happen in every business around the country, so around the world? So we just want to, so now I'm like, hey, just check in. What did you hear? What are you going to do based on what I just said? I heard you say this. No, that's not what I'm saying. Don't take the tires off that truck. No. Thank God I checked.
Yes.
And I keep trying to point to, Sonny, is that these poor miscommunication, everyone erodes the level of trust and reliability that we feel with each other. So it has a damage beyond. And we don't look and see, wow, what's going on? So this is like a paying attention. Well, what's actually going on, and how can we get the communication and get the culture moving the way we want it to, so people feel really happy and good about it?
Yeah. And Marcus, I know we have, we are big when it comes to lifelong learning. I really, I'm committed to lifelong learning and spend a lot of time and invest a lot on my own learnings and people around me. And we have done so many trainings, but the way collaborative way impacted us, it was so unique and very, very high impact training. So I want to share this with the world. And can you give me those 5 principles and 5 practices again, and also where people can start with the listening? So if you can give the entire practice in a nutshell. 5 practices, their names, and with listening, where can people start? So if we want to share something with them, where they can start.
But listening generously, speaking straight, which is very important in terms of listening, because people talk to me also, well, now I'm listening so well, and people are talking to me about all sorts of stuff, and it's taking up actually too much time. Okay, well, that's fine. Then you need to speak up and say, excuse me, I can't talk about that right now. It's all common sense. People are fine with you telling them, I want to hear what you have to say, and can you come back later or tomorrow when I can give you my full attention? Please do that. Don't be victimized by your better listening. Okay, so this speaking straight is very important to keep things going in a two-way direction. Being for each other, which is really about supporting each other's success and having each other's back and giving timely performance feedback like that. Doing cleanups. You know, one of the things that shift culture, you have to do a lot of cleanup of the culture, the problems the culture has created currently. Clean that all up, get everybody back on the same page, and now let's move in this direction. Let's start to operate this way. And we'll all make mistakes and fall back, but we support each other in with that and going forward. Honoring commitments is a huge area. Most companies have a lot of upset about people not keeping their commitments. Who's responsible for that? Whose fault is it? Who do we blame? Ignoring the broken commitments, and then people hiding around their commitments that they haven't delivered, hoping that person doesn't call them out on it, and so on and so forth. So we really work a lot on that, getting that one up so it's a supportive practice. And acknowledgement and appreciation, so you can really lubricate the quick movement. So people feeling appreciated and acknowledged helps, and then put in and all the effort they need to. And to start with listening generously, I feel like it's the things we talked about. Pay attention to your checking out, bring yourself back. Pay attention to the filters that you have. Notice if you're being curious, and if you're listening for value and contribution. Pay attention to and create, and then choose different filters, more empowering filters. And then lastly, as you've been doing really well, replicate or check for understanding. So is this what I hear? This is what I think I hear you saying, Sonny. Is that what your intent was? Okay. And if I may, and I know we're probably getting short on time, but I want to say one more thing about impact. One thing you can do with listening is you'll notice that we're all impacted by what people say and do. And so many times you'll notice that people are impacted in a way you did not intend. Mm. Many leaders have to become aware of your unintended impacts on other people. And in a non-collaborative fashion, to say that, well, that's their problem. I didn't mean that. Mm-hmm. But with your awareness, people have filters and they twist things around and they hear what they hear. And unfortunately, they tend to hear like they're being attacked, belittled, put down, even if that wasn't your intent. So this disconnect between intent and impact is one of the biggest problems in communication. And we do a lot of work to help you become aware of what your impacts are, how to be responsible for your impacts, how to clean up negative impacts, mm-hmm. and also how to be clearer about your intent. But if someone's negatively impacted, what do you want to do? You want to get curious. So it hits you that way. I didn't intend that. Tell me, why did you think I was attacking you there? Mm-hmm. And now somebody who's done the collaborative will be like, it's because of my filter. Everything sounds like an attack to me. I live in a defensive posture. I'm working with that.
That's so true. And, if there are entrepreneurs out there listening to this, this was a game changer for us. And as I said earlier, we have done so many leadership development trainings, and this was the highest impact leadership training. And it just changes the entire environment because, when you practice these 5 principles of listening, being there for each other, honoring commitment is taking accountability, personal and holding each other's accountable, and appreciating and recognizing other people's efforts. This is, this, and just that good intent for others, right? Being there for everyone. It's a game changer for the culture. And the byproduct of this, what I have seen, and there's just so much out there on growth mindset and creating safe environment for people, weigh-in and buy-in of people, and having one team, one mission, one goal where people feel that they have co-created this business strategy that they're supporting. That is the byproduct of this. It kind of helps people with their growth mindset because now they are practicing that generous listening, which starts with being open-minded and being able to listen to other perspectives. That's just a game changer for people where they are fixed mindset, not growth mindset, because they need to shift from fixed mindset to growth mindset. That's where the listening starts, and people feel more safe that okay, leadership to everyone is willing to listen, and they are willing to listen to other perspectives, and if there's something bad happens, then you have the tool to clean up, and that cleanup resets everything and it improves your relationship health with that person, because the alternative way is that you carry that baggage for a very, very long time, and those emotions stay with you because it's all here. It's just you're trying to suppress that. But with the cleanup practice, it gives you the tool, it gives you a process where you can reset if something needs to be done there in terms of improving relationship by having that cleanup. It really helps personally, professionally, and if this is one thing that you're not aware of, please, we will have more resources with this podcast where you can find more information about the collaborative way and how you can adopt these practices to help your culture. And this is a beautiful thing. And thank you so much, Marcus, for your partnership. Thank you for making a very, very positive, high impact on IT by design culture. We love it here, and thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome, Sunny, and thank you so much. And I really appreciate this conversation with you and your participation. I think it completes the whole view from the side of what I'm saying and what you've understood and learned and practiced with the company. That really adds a lot. So, and this was a lot of fun. I hope we get to have some more.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus.